Okay, let's talk about the first topic tonight, the rules and mechanics, what we use. It's very simple. There's essentially in Texas, we are the only state that uses the NCAA rules as the basis of our football rules. So that's actually a good thing because I think a lot of us probably watch college football and probably understand the rules to some degree. And also what happens with the rules is the UIL has some exceptions. So we don't necessarily do everything. There are some exceptions. So when you combine the rule book with the exceptions, that is actually the rules that will govern all of the contests that we are going to schedule you for in the DFOA. And everyone will get a copy of this presentation and or a link to it. I'm going to put it on the website. So there'll be hyperlinks in there as well that you can click on and take you to the locations where you can find NCAA rules. I've already showed you one, which is our website. Same for the exceptions. And as I mentioned, they're on our website right here. So this is for 11-man football. Now, similarly, for 6-man football, and Texas has a pretty vibrant 6-man football program across the state, and we do games for 6-man teams. It's, again, very similar. We use the basis of our rules for the NCAA, and then the UIL has created 6-man rules variations and approved rulings. And obviously, one of the big variations is we're not using 11 players on each team on the field, where we're going to have 6. And again, similar to the 11-man, these links here will take you to both of these documents. And as I said earlier, it's on our website. Now, that's the rules. Now, the mechanics. These are what our operating procedures when we're on the field. They tell us basically where we line up for all of the different types of plays, whether it be a regular play from scrimmage, a scrimmage kick formation, a kickoff, a try after a touchdown, for example. And they tell for each position what our keys and responsibilities are. So not only from a just before the snap, but once the snap has occurred and even after the snap. So these are the documents that TASO has created. And if you notice here, they are for a crew of 3 officials, 4 officials, 5 officials, 7 officials. We also have created a mechanics manual for chain crews and clock operators. So most of your sub-varsity games are going to probably be here in these first 3 documents. So focus on these. I would start with 3-man first, then 4-man, and then 5-man. No need to be doing 7-man as a new official, unless you're somebody coming in with prior experience and might be working some games. So, but I wanted you to know that these are the mechanics manuals. They're designed to give you and teach you the best officiating techniques for us TASO officials when we work in Texas middle and high school games. We're not authorized to make up any new mechanics or do anything that's not covered in the document. So we need to be cognizant of that. And you can find these in your members portal. And there is a login required. They're also available in RefTown now as well. But again, the key thing I want you to know here is we're going to talk about mechanics in each of the classes tonight. But you really need to be focusing on 3-man first, then 4-man, and then 5-man, because they kind of incrementally build on each other. If you start with 5 and then try to go to 4 and then 3, it's a little awkward to try to catch on to each of the mechanics. Okay, so that's our overview of the rules and mechanics. Let me see if we have any questions. I do want to introduce, and I hope they're on the call. I'm going to do a quick check. I don't see Alexion or Keith Laurent. Normally these guys would be on and would be answering questions in the chat window. So what I'll do is I'll periodically stop and look in the chat window and see if there's any questions and do my best to address them. Oh, I see. Alexa, you're on. I can't tell who you are because there's about 10 or 15 people with the same name, iPhone. If you can change your name, that would be great. And then I can also unmute you. Okay, we do have one question. Otis has asked, do we do all the trainings to be able to begin refereeing for the next season? Like, we don't take mandatory attendance for you, but I highly encourage you to attend all of the training if you can. I know that life gets in the way, whether it's work or family commitments, and that's why we do try to provide the material that we cover in the classes to you available in not only in RefTown, but we put it on the website as well. So my advice, so again, it's very important. The more training you can attend, not only in these sessions, but some of the sessions that we'll set up, next month and maybe early September, on-field scrimmages, things like that, will be very beneficial to you before you, step on the field that first time. So hopefully that answered your question. Somebody's asked a question, Mark, I think, about access to different portals. Do we only get that access after our background check is complete? Yes. When you sign up for TASO, one of the requirements for the UIL is that we have to do a background check on all of our officials, and you would not become a active and eligible TASO official until you've actually completed the background check. So that will happen shortly after the background check. And then also, once you pay DFOA, we do check that you've joined TASO and have passed a background check as well. So yes, you would not get access to RefTown or TASO.org until the background check is complete and you've completed registration with both organizations. Okay, I don't see any more questions. I'm going to go on to the next topic. Let me see real quickly though, Lexi, if I can see you. I don't see your name in the chat window, Lexi. Okay, well, we'll work on that later. Before we jump into the presentation, where do you recommend getting uniforms? Guys, I mean, just go to the website and click on, there's an icon down below for uniforms. It'll take you right to TASO where the approved uniform vendors are. And you can contact them. You can buy online. I think there's no physical stores in the Metroplex area that are TASO approved vendors. So that's the unfortunate part. We are going to try to get some uniform vendors in our meetings, in some of our chapter meetings coming up, that hopefully will be in person, and then you'll have opportunities to buy uniforms there. They do have starter blocks. All right, another question from Gary Nichols. Are exams taken prior to being assigned games? Not necessarily prior to being assigned, but we will check anyone who's assigned a game as we get close to the season kickoff. If you have not passed your new members test, then you will not be, those assignments will most likely be taken away from you. It's just a requirement by TASO that as a new member, obviously joining TASO, joining the DFOA, you do have to take the new members test. It's a test designed for new officials, so it's not as complex and difficult. And then once you've done that, then you can be assigned games and actually work the games. Someone asked, how soon would we be able to start? I'm not sure I understand the question. You can, officiating, if you're asking how soon can you start officiating, it's really a function of what I just said. You have to have joined TASO, you have to have joined the DFOA, you have to have registered in RefTown, and then you can reach out to the satellite secretaries. Look at the new members guide. It's going to answer a lot of these questions, guys. And then once you get assigned games, you want to make sure you get that test taken and completed before the start of the season, or those assignments will get taken away. The exam, if you are a member of TASO already, the DFOA, the exam link is in your TASO football portal. And we'll talk more about that in some upcoming classes. So I'd like you to get through definitions and stuff before you worry about taking the new members test. And just trust me, guys, the test is not that difficult. It's open book. It's online. You get up to 20 attempts to take the test. So you won't have a problem passing the test. You need a minimum score of 70. So don't worry if you take it one time and maybe you don't pass it. You get 19 more attempts. And I'm sure if I needed to ask TASO to give somebody 21 attempts, they probably would would allow you to have 21 attempts. But I've never had anybody that that's needed to do that. So hopefully that answers your question. We'll talk more about tests and stuff. And at the end of the meeting, I'm going to, again, go through what you need to do to get ready and be in our systems and actually get assigned games. Okay, I'm going to close the chat now, guys, and then I'm going to go into the next presentation. I'm going to need a little bit of help on this one because I'm going to try to share it full screen. Seeing the full presentation, or are you now seeing the presentation and then a small screen showing the next slide? Answer. Okay. Someone said it was a small screen on the side, so that's good. I'm going to switch displays, and then you should see the presentation in full mode here in a second. Okay, so hopefully that fixed that problem, and you're now seeing the full screen. We're going to talk about Rule 2 definitions. So if you got the soft copy of the rulebook that I sent you, or you've downloaded one already, you'll see that Rule 2 is definitions in the NCAA rulebook. We're not really going to cover Rule 1. There's just not a lot of stuff in there that you need to focus on right now. I would still encourage you to read it. Rule 2 will set the foundation, though, for pretty much every other presentation we're going to do after tonight. And so it's very important that you understand the definitions. We're going to try to go through as much as we can, but it really is incumbent on you to actually be studying outside of the classes. So again, this objective tonight, we're going to try to help you understand and familiarize you with most of the definitions in the rule book, because it is that foundation, as I mentioned. We're not going to cover every single definition that's in Rule 2. That would be probably 3 or 4 classes. So again, as I mentioned earlier, please keep studying outside of the class. If I got anything wrong in the presentation, someone please point it out. I've done my best to update it for this year. And the NCAA rulebook and the exceptions are, again, our final authority. Just remember, guys, we are not the NFL. We don't play on Sunday. We don't referee on Sunday. There's a lot of rules differences. We're going to keep this discussion focused truly on NCAA rulebook and the UIL exceptions. So I covered this in the new members orientation, but I want to go through it because you have to, first of all, understand who is Team A and who is Team B, because the rule book will be talking in these terms throughout the whole book. So Team A is the team that puts the ball in play, and Team B is the opponent. Pretty straightforward. The offense is the team in possession, and the defense is the team that's not in possession. So you might say, well, how's that any different than Team A? Well, we're going to get into that. Team A and Team B designations do not change during the hold down, even though the offense and defensive designations can. Team A and Team B retain these designations until the ball is next ready for play. There's some other kind of definitions and how they identify the yard lines on a football field. So an A-30 is telling you that this is the yard line on the Team A side of the field, their 30-yard line. Similarly, if you see B-5, and again, guys, it can be any number up to 49, 49 and a half, approaching 50, right? Because there's 2 halves of the field. The B-5 is the 5-yard line on Team B side of the ball. That's very important. And the way I remember, and when I started out, A-30, I remembered that dash equals hash, and hash is on the field. So that's how I kind of remembered it in my mind. Now, how does the rule book identify a player? So they'll say A22, and that's a no dashes, you notice there, team A player wearing a jersey with number 22. Similarly, you have like example B45. That's a team B player who's wearing 45 on his jersey. So these things are very straightforward, but you'll notice that when you're reading the rules, they talk in these kinds of terms. They identify spots on the field with this type of nomenclature, and they identify players as well. So very important to understand. On a scrimmage play, Team A snaps the ball, and Team B is on defense. On a kicking play, Team A is the kicking team, and Team B is the receiving team. When the ball becomes dead, Team A and Team B remain the same. Remember, they don't change until the ball becomes ready for play for the next play. Now, let's talk about the field. You know, the nice thing about being new officials is any rules changes that have happened, well, you know, you're not going to have to unlearn the previous rules and learn the new rules. And for example, one of the changes this year was the playing area got extended from the 20 to the 20. It used to be 25 to the 25. So you'll see this is updated to reflect the latest NCAA rules. So let's talk about what are some of the key aspects of the field. So you can see there the blue line, that's what we call the sideline. I think most of us probably understand that. The green line, well, that's the goal line. I think we all kind of hopefully understand what that is. That's sometimes we nickname it the money line. The goal line is very important. And then the end lines, most people may not know it, but that line that's at the back of the end zones and goes from sideline to sideline, that is the end line. And these are the actual terms that we would use when talking about them. Okay, let's talk about, everyone knows the hash marks. The actual official name really is the inbound spot. We would never put a ball in play outside of the hash marks. It's always going to be somewhere either right on the hash mark or in between the hash marks. We also talk about the 9-yard marks. And typically, hopefully you're on a well-marked field. The good news is most of our games are, certainly an overwhelming majority of our games are done on field turf, and they're marked very nicely. And the 9-yard marks typically corresponds to the top of the numbers. Sometimes you'll hear people say top of the numbers. What they're saying here really is the 9-yard marks. Now, looking outside the sidelines, there are some very important areas. We have this restricted area, and you can see it on the top and the bottom. And the restricted area is really the area that is, this is the area for the officials to officiate, especially the ones on the sideline, to officiate the game, certainly during live play. Yes, people have to traverse through that restricted area when they're doing substitutions or coming off the field, et cetera. But this area we like to keep clear for us while we are actively working a play so that we avoid any kind of collision with anybody. Not only can jeopardize and hurt us, but it can hurt players, coaches as well. So this is what we call, you'll hear it nicknamed the white because it's typically white for either all of it or for at least in the team area. And this is typically referred to as the officials area, the white area, but the official term is restricted area. All right, just behind the restricted area, and let me mention too that restricted area, you know, is a full 6 feet basically. You get 2 yards from top to bottom, and then extends from end line to end line. The coaching box is right behind that area, and that is the area that we like to keep for the coaches and primarily the coaches only. And you'll hear us talking about this more and more throughout the classes about keeping your sideline clean, giving the coaches their room. If we do a good job of reminding the coaches to get their players back, they can then use the coaching area. It helps us because then they're less inclined to step into our restricted area because their players might be crowding them out. And then behind that is the team area. And this is where we want to see the squad members on the sideline, the trainers, water boys and girls, ball, you know, most time the ball handlers, et cetera. So you can see that area is behind the coaching box. And we really try to emphasize keeping those squad members in those areas so that, because if they keep coming forward, they're going to push the coaches into our area. So that's why it's very important to understand what each of these areas are, who's really allowed to be in them, and who do we want to, as we're officiating, what do we want to focus on? So we definitely want to keep our area clear first and foremost. That's for our safety and anybody else's. And then we want to make sure that we're helping the coaches keep their players back, and the coaches are helping us keep their players back, because it benefits both the coaches and the officials. So that's kind of just a quick rundown of the field. I don't know if we have anything else. Oh, yes, one more thing. There is a term called the boundary lines, and that's simply what the lines are, the sidelines and the end lines. So the lines that go all the way around the complete field, so to include the end zones and the sidelines. Okay, let's talk about a player. If you noticed, if you caught this on the previous slide, I didn't call the people in the team area players. I called them squad members. That's because a player is a participant in the game who's not a substitute or a replaced player. We're really talking about those players that are on the field. Players on the sidelines, we don't technically call them players. They are called squad members. And as I mentioned, a player is actually somebody who's participating in the play. All right, I'm going to stop here. I don't know if we have any questions. Looks like we got some. I see Alexi's on now. I'm going to unmute him so he can speak up as well. Thank you, Alexi.
You're welcome.
All right, anything we need to address, Alexi, in the chat box? Looks like we're good. I see one question. So if a team has 12 on the field, are all 12 considered players, or is the extra player considered not? Well, if there's a play going on and a team has 12 players on the field, obviously we're going to have a flag down, depending on the scenario, when and how we throw that flag. Yes, we would still consider them players, but we're going to have a foul for that. Again, the definition doesn't say a player is up to 11 people on the field. And Alexi, I'm going to swap my view. Are you seeing the full screen version of my presentation?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. I just want to make sure everyone else. Okay, now let's talk about some very important definitions as well. Live ball, dead ball, and loose ball. These are all very important to understanding the rules. So a live ball is a ball in play. It could be a pass, a kick, or a fumble that has not yet touched the ground. That is a live ball in flight. Dead ball is a ball not in play. Very simple, very straightforward. A loose ball, this is a live ball that's not in player possession during a running play, a scrimmage or free kick before possession is gained or regained, or the ball is declared dead by rule. During the interval after a legal forward pass is touched and before it becomes complete, incomplete, or intercepted. All right, a dead ball is ready for play when the referee, with the 40-second clock running, the way this will typically work, official places the ball at the hash mark or between the inbounds marks. That's what I said. It's always going to be at the hash mark or in between, and steps away to his position. Now, most of the time, if you have a 4-man crew or larger, that's going to be the umpire. Again, most of the time, there are exceptions. If you're a 3-man crew, then that's going to be the referee who's typically most of the time putting that ball down and then stepping away. There are times, maybe we had an administrative stoppage or something that we had to set the play clock to 25. So with the play clock set at 25 seconds, or it could be set to 40 seconds after an injury to or the loss of the helmet by a defensive player. The referee is going to sound his whistle and either signals to start the game clock or signals that the ball is ready for play. We'll talk more about that. That sounds very complex. It's really not. What it typically means is we had some administrative stoppage, and based on what that stoppage was, we're going to ask the play clock be set to 25 seconds or 40 seconds, and then we're either going to start the game clock and the play clock, or we're just going to start the play clock. We would never signal both. We would never signal start the clock and then signal the ball's ready for play. Now, you'll notice some stuff on here. In these brackets here, S2 on the bottom and S1, if you have your NCAA rulebook and you open it up, and in the middle, I don't know the exact page number, there are signals that we use in football. And all that does is identify what is that S2 and S1 are identifying which signal we're talking about here. Specifically, S1 is the ready for play signal. And if we were in person, I could actually show you these, but we're not. And then start the game clock is signal 2. So you're going to see that S bracket in a lot of presentations. I just wanted you to know what that is. Okay, let's talk about the neutral zone. We hear this term a lot, but it's actually, if you were to probably want to win a bet, win a soda or a beer from somebody, you could probably ask them what is their understanding of the neutral zone, and ask them to define it. And I think you'd have a high degree of winning. So it's the space between the two scrimmage lines. Now you're probably going, wait a second, how are there two scrimmage lines? Well, we're going to talk about it. And it also extends all the way to the sidelines, and it's the width of the length of the ball. And the neutral zone is established when the ball is made ready for play. We just talked about how do we make the ball ready for play on the previous slide. And the neutral zone exists until a change of team possession, or until a scrimmage kick crosses the neutral zone, or until the ball is declared dead. So we can see that it exists only for a finite period of time. So what does that look like? So I've kind of drawn it here. I know this is not exactly, you're not exactly seeing where the referee has put the ball down, made it ready for play, but let's assume where that's at and where the center has it. He's left it there. This is what it would look like if you were to be able to shade it in. So that neutral zone is the width of that football going from sideline to sideline. Now, we mentioned 2 lines of scrimmage. Let's talk about those so you understand what they are. The offensive line of scrimmage is simply the line that intersects the end of the football that's on the team A side of the ball. And from that, you can probably imagine, what is the defensive line of scrimmage? Well, that's the line that intersects the point of the ball that's closest to team B, or the team on defense, in this picture. So that's the definition of the neutral zone. And here's just kind of a good shot. When you're refereeing, I don't care if it's a middle school game or not, if you're the head linesman or the line judge, this is kind of going to be your view. And you guys are the guys that typically will be ruling on anything related to the neutral zone, whether it's infractions or not. So it's a good thing to know that when that football was made ready for play, that's what defined where that neutral zone is. Now, we're going to get into linemen. What is a lineman? Well, everyone's saying, well, that's just somebody on the line. Well, there's actually a definition for it. They have to meet some criteria to technically be considered a lineman. For a Team A player to be on the line of scrimmage, they must be the snapper, or their head must break the plane of a line drawn through the waistline of the snapper. All linemen must face their opponent's goal line. You can't have a lineman that comes up to the line of scrimmage and lines up backwards. Shoulders must be approximately parallel to the line of scrimmage. And I say approximately. We're not going to get, rulers and T-squares out there, but we want them to be predominantly parallel to the line of scrimmage. We'll talk about, what to look for with respect to that in some of the upcoming training sessions, because it's important. There are some techniques that some linemen do try to do that really push the boundaries on this to give them an advantage. And we'll talk more about those later. Okay, an interior lineman is just somebody who's not on the end of the line. So that they're a lineman, but they're just not on the end of the line. And a restricted lineman is an interior or another lineman who's numbered 50 through 79. And these two definitions, interior lineman and restricted lineman, well, they're important because they apply to pass eligibility, who's eligible to receive a forward pass. It also will get into some discussions around formations and what's legal and what's not when we get into scrimmage kicks as well. So important to understand this. Alexi, we good? Any questions up to now?
No, we're good. And I answered the question about the signals being on pages FR 134 through 136 in the rule book. And they are not in the mechanics manuals, only in the rule book.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I just kind of went through some stuff here, and I just want to kind of show you an example of, you're going to see this in middle school. This looks like it might have been maybe a JV game or a varsity game. But what you're going to see here is, in this image, the snapper's shoulders are not approximately parallel to the line of scrimmage. This would be a illegal formation foul at the snap. The reason we don't shut this play down is because he could correct it before he snapped. But technically right now, he's not considered a lineman. And, he's considered a lineman, but he's not meeting all the criteria. That's why it would be an illegal formation foul. You don't see this too often, but just wanted to point it out. This is a pretty egregious alignment issue that we definitely would flag every time, hopefully. Okay, so we talked about linemen. Now we're going to shift and we're going to talk about a back, because as Team A is running a scrimmage play, everyone is either a lineman or a back. There's no other definitions for any of the other players. So a back is simply a teammate player who's not a lineman and whose head or body doesn't break the plane of a line drawn through the waistline of the nearest Team A lineman. And I'm going to kind of expand on that here in a little bit as well. They're also the player in position to receive a hand-to-hand snap. And the reason that definition is in there is because the quarterback, oftentimes, if he's up under the center, his head is almost always going to be breaking the line of the nearest Team A lineman. In this case, it's the snapper. So the QB kind of gets an exemption. We do consider him, if he's in a position to receive a hand-to-hand snap, we do consider him to be a back, even though technically he is probably breaking that line through the nearest lineman's waist. All right, a lineman becomes a back before the snap when he moves to a position as a back and stops. So you could see a formation where someone is initially lined up as a lineman, and then they, what we would say, shift to the backfield. So they would move to the backfield and then stop. The stopping there is key. They have to do that or we would have a foul at the snap. Okay, very, very important. There cannot be more than 4 backs in the backfield at the snap. And we're going to talk more about this when we get into scrimmage play lessons down the road here. But this is important. The key thing that you can't take away from this is, well, okay, if there can't be more than 4 backs in the backfield at the snap, then I have to have 7 people on the line. That's not what this is saying. This is saying that you just cannot have more than 4 backs lined up in the backfield at the snap. And I got some basic graphics I'm going to kind of show to you. So you can see that we have a football here. 50 is the snapper in this formation, and I even put the lines on there just to give you the reference of defensive line of scrimmage, offensive line of scrimmage. So if we look at the waistline, kind of the approximate waistline of the snapper here, so drawn through 50 here, it looks like 71, 61, 60, and 70 have and even 80 are complying with being a lineman. And now we look at 13. 13 is not breaking the waistline of 50, but we kind of got this imaginary line through 80. 80 is the closest lineman, and 13 is breaking that. So technically, that's a violation. I mean, that he's not really a back because he's breaking that line of the waistline of the nearest lineman. But I'm just going to tell you folks, for middle school and even JV, even varsity, we're not going to get too technical on that aspect. If we can clearly see that 80 is on the line, 13 is pretty much far behind him, even though he might be just barely leaning into that waistline, we're going to put him in the backfield if that makes the formation legal. We'll talk more about this again when we get into scrimmage plays. But I wanted to give you the exact definition, but then from a philosophy perspective, we're not going to get really, really technical on a back who might be breaking the waistline of the nearest lineman. Okay,
Bruce?
Yes, sir.
You meant technically put him on the line of scrimmage because you said backfield and they would put 5 in the backfield. You mean line of scrimmage?
And yes, in that case, in that example, you're right. We might put him on the line if it makes it legal. Now we just have to make sure that we're careful because now he's an interior lineman. But that's correct. And it's really, I said, you're in any example where you have that in a game, and when you guys see that, you're going to have to make a judgment call of, if I put him on the line, that makes the formation legal, but you have to be aware of, does he go out and catch pass? If I put him in the backfield, you want to make sure that you're not putting 5 in the backfield as well. And it's something we'll definitely talk to you about, and how you communicate to coaches to try to talk them out of that, so that you don't see that every play. You're telling the coach, I really need your backs to get in the backfield if that's where we're going to be, and things like that. Okay, so here we have a picture. Yes, I know we don't have 11 players in white. There's one that's out of frame down here on the bottom, but we don't really care about that. I wanted to just kind of draw a line here through kind of where the snapper's waistline is, and let's talk about who's a lineman and who's a back. And I think we can see here that looks like both guards, both tackles, this wide receiver on the top, we're going to assume this wide receiver on the bottom as well, are all complying with being a lineman. The quarterback, as we know, he gets an exemption. We consider him, if he's under the snapper, he gets an exemption. He's considered a back. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4 backs. And so we would be good here at this snap, assuming there was no other fouls committed from a formation perspective. So this is a legal formation. Now let's talk about another play. Let's draw that imaginary line through the snapper's waistline. And gee, what do we have here? We got maybe the left guard. I might put the right guard on just because he's kind of close. But I think we all agree that there's the tackle, both tackles, both guys kind of lined up outside the tackle. Clearly in the backfield, you got 3 guys behind them, and then you got the shadow of the punter over here. So clearly, we might at best have 3 guys on the line of scrimmage here. This is definitely an illegal formation. So it's not legal. Now, I will tell you guys this, and Lexi, certainly chime in here, Keith as well if you're on. In middle school games, and I'm talking 7th and 8th grade games, I'm kind of giving them the back of the butt of the snapper, just because, first of all, these might be 1st and 2nd year football players. They may not have even played a lot of football. It's everything they do to get lined up. We're going to talk to coaches. Hey, coach, I really need you to get your tackle on the line of scrimmage. Tell them to move up, or your guard, or whoever might be the person that's not quite getting there. We don't want to get too technical and throw a flag on every single play in a 7th and 8th grade game, and even some 9th grade games, depending on the level of competitiveness. Okay, another formation. You can already kind of see, probably before I even draw the line, we're going to have a problem here. This was actually a JV game at a fairly large school, but it can happen anywhere. And you see here, when I draw that line, and I'll bet if I even draw the line on the back of his rear end on the snapper, we still would have 10 guys in the backfield. So definitely an illegal formation. We've only got 1 lineman and we've got 10 backs. So we would have a foul here at the snap for an illegal formation. And I want to talk a little bit about, you'll see this kind of angled. If you look at the right guard, right tackle and the guy lined up to the other side of the right tackle. Here's part of the problem. A lot of these times, these guys line up on the back foot of the guy to the left of them, and what happens? They look like kind of a goose formation in the sky, and that's what gets them into trouble a lot of times. And so if that right guard is not getting up on the line and that tackle lines up on his back foot, well, he's not going to be on the line, and similarly for another guy lined up to the outside of him as well. Okay, that's a quick overview through formations. Let's talk about substitution. Any questions, Lexi, that we need to talk about?
No, it's all good, bro.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, an incoming substitute must enter from his team area. So all this is saying is, remember that team area I kind of walked you through. What we want is the substitute to come through the team area and to come on the field. We don't want them running let's say the ball's down here on the 5-yard line. We don't want them running all the way down out of bounds and then coming in at the 5-yard line. We want them to enter through the team area, come through the coaching area and the restricted area, and then get onto the field. We don't want them running down the sideline and coming in that way. A departing player must exit their sideline. So this is a little bit different. So if this person, we had a guy run off, a substitute coming in, and he came in the right way through the team area, and he comes down here, that defender can actually just exit the sideline there and then immediately proceed to the team area. The substitute must remain in the game for one play, and the replaced player must remain out of the game for one play. Obviously, if either team calls a timeout, then that they can come back in. They don't have to stay out for one play or stay in for one play. Okay, pretty straightforward, I hope. Now let's talk about fouls and violations and penalties. And this is something that you're going to hear the announcers on Saturday talking about. Oh, there was a penalty on that play. Well, really, what you're going to see here is that there was a foul and it resulted in a penalty. And that's important to understand. So I'm going to kind of talk you through that. So think of foul is to penalty as crime is to punishment. The court systems can't really punish you unless you've committed a crime. I can't impose a penalty on a team unless they've committed a foul. That's really what we're trying to say here. So a foul is a rule infraction for which a penalty is prescribed. For example, false start. The penalty is 5 yards if accepted. Pass interference, offensive pass interference. It's going to be 15 yards unless we're doing half the distance. So that's the penalty. The foul was false start or the offensive pass interference, et cetera, et cetera. And I kind of went through that. Holding is not a penalty, it's a foul. The penalty is 10 yards. Now, a violation is a rule infraction in which no penalty is prescribed and does not offset a penalty for a foul. We're going to talk more about violations later. The good news is there's very, very few instances of violations. And so most of the time, it's not even going to come into play. A lot of times it's involving kicking plays, and that's where you'll see it. And we'll talk about that when we do talk about kicking plays. Okay, more on fouls and violations and penalties. 2 live ball fouls can offset or cancel. However, a violation cannot offset a foul. So all they're saying here is, let's say team A committed a violation and team B committed a foul. Well, they don't cancel out because you have to have 2 fouls, 2 or more fouls for them to offset or cancel. Violations can never offset a foul. So let's look at an example. So team A, which is the kicking team here, illegally touches a punt, which is a violation. That's one of the examples I told you that we have. After which team B, the receiving team, blocks below the waist, which is a foul. In this case, we wouldn't have offsetting fouls because we don't have 2 or more fouls, at least one on each team. All we have is a violation and a foul. So in that case, we would not offset the fouls, the foul or the violation. Okay, let's talk about some specific types of fouls. We hear this a lot when we watch football. Personal foul. This is a foul that involves illegal physical contact that endangers the safety of another player. These are what we would typically call the big ones, the 15-yard fouls. Now, there's also another type of personal foul, And this one has an even stricter penalty. So this is a flagrant personal foul. And it is, again, illegal physical contact so extreme or deliberate that it places an opponent in danger of catastrophic injury. So I think the most common one we know of today is targeting. And what that means is when a person commits a flagrant personal foul, not only are they going to get a 15-yard penalty associated with it, but they're also that player will also be disqualified from the game. All right. That's any questions on penalties? We still good? Okay, in possession. Let's talk about possession. We talked about that earlier about the team in possession. So it's important to understand, first of all, what is possession? So it's holding, when you're in possession, you're holding or controlling a live ball or a dead ball to be snapped or free kicked. And a player is in possession when a player has the ball firmly in his grasp by holding or controlling it with his hands or arms while contacting the ground in bounds. I just want to point out, it says with the hand or arms, and the arms would, your hands and arms. It does not say legs. And a team is in possession when one of its players is in possession or attempting a punt, drop kick, or a place kick, or while a forward pass thrown by one of its players is in flight, or one of its players was last in possession during a loose ball. What that means there is, let's say there was a running play and team A, and the running back for team A who's carrying the ball fumbles the ball. While that ball is loose, which means it has not been caught or recovered by anybody, it's still in team A is still technically in possession of the ball. That's what they're highlighting there. Or when a team is next to snap or free kick the ball, that team would be considered in possession. All right, any questions on that? I went through those pretty quickly, but those are important to understand. Team possession and player possession. Okay, let's talk about a catch. This is the act of establishing player possession of a live ball in flight. And there are some pretty lengthy definitions in there. We're going to talk about that when we get into passing plays. So see FR30 there for a full definition, but we're still going to talk a little bit more about it tonight. An interception is catching an opponent's pass or fumble. A recovery is securing player possession of the live ball after it strikes the ground. This is something that you have to understand. Recovery always implies that the ball has hit the ground or strikes the ground. That's important to know, especially when you're reading the rules and when you're taking tests. A lot of people get confused by catch or recovery. All right, to catch, intercept, or recover a ball, a player who jumps in the air must come down in bounds. All that's saying is you might have jumped from the field of play and intercepted the pass, but as you guys know, you've got to come down in bounds. You got to have that body part in bounds. So if one foot lands in bounds and the receiver has possession and firm control of the ball with the hands or arms, it is a catch, interception, or recovery. And we kind of got this heel toe and toe heel. We'll talk more about that when we get into when we cover the passing game, because there's some aspects about that are important to understand as well for you to understand if something is really, if they're really catching, intercepting, or recovering a ball. If caught by a kneeling or a prone player in bounds, it's a catch, interception, or recovery. Obviously, the play is going to be dead right away, but it is still considered a catch. We also want them to maintain control of the ball long enough to enable them to perform an act common to the game. You hear that term a lot. What are some acts common to the game? They got the ball long enough to be able to throw a backward pass or hand the ball off, or advance it, or to avoid or ward off an opponent. Those are some examples of acts common to the game. Now, when in question, the catch, interception, or recovery is not completed. So that's our guiding philosophy on it. And the ground can't cause a fumble, but it can cause an incompletion. We talked about that a little bit, about if a player jumps up in the air or is in the act of somehow in the air and has control of the ball, he's got to complete the process of going to the ground. So if we get loss of the ball simultaneous to returning to the ground, it is not a catch, interception, or recovery. I think you guys know this is one of the most reviewed things in the NCAA football games. So let's recap. When going to the ground, the receiver must maintain complete and continuous control of the ball throughout the process of contacting the ground. And unfortunately, when we meet virtually, when we're in a classroom, we can kind of actually demonstrate a little bit of this for you in person, but hopefully you get the idea here. If they're near the sideline going to the ground out of bounds, if ball control is lost, then touches the ground before control regained, it is not a catch. If control is regained inbounds prior to the ball touching the ground, then it is a catch. Now, if the player loses control of the ball while simultaneously touching the ground with any part of his body, or there is a doubt that the acts were simultaneous, it's also not a catch. And if a player has control of the ball, a slight movement of the ball, even if it touches the ground, will not be considered loss of possession. He must lose control of the ball in order for there to be a loss of possession. And guys, this is a judgment call. And this was a rules change that got put in, I think, a year or two ago. So there can be very slight movement, but we're really looking to make sure that they still have predominantly maintained control of that ball so that there is not a loss of possession. And I think I got some video examples. I hope they work out okay. Let me see how I can start it here. I think this first play is going to be an example of did the catch get completed or not before the ball came out. Let me hit the play button here. Okay, I think we all agree. Not the best angle to make that determination, right? But we're going to see some reverse angles here in a second. Okay, so receiver appears to control the ball in flight, a little bit in the air, comes down, so we're fine there. He's got control. Now we want to see some kind of act common to the game, some kind of time control. And I think if you watch this, you see that he's got that ball firmly in control, and he's starting to try to ward off this defender and advance the ball. And then you're going to see the receiver kind of get a hand in there and help knock the ball out. Oop. So on that play, we had there was a fumble. Okay, here's another example. And this will be, again, a catch, no catch scenario. I think my display's turned around on me again, folks, sorry. Make it bigger for you. All right, let's play this play. Again, we want to kind of apply that same logic. Do we have control? Do we have some kind of time element in the game? We're trying to look for that. And we're going to get some better looks at this as well. What happened there? Got a little crusty on us. Let's play that spot again. Here. I don't know if it's pixelating for you guys as well, but this was supposed to be a counter example of the previous play. This is where we did not have control, and you would have seen from the other side that he's bobbling the ball. In fact, the ball comes out, so we would have an incomplete pass in this scenario. Let's see if it'll play better this time. Looks like it's not, so I'm not going to waste more time on that. Okay, we got another play example here again around catches. This is actually I don't want to ruin it for you, but you'll see in the replays some pretty athletic action going on here. It's going to be hard to tell from this angle. Again, it's very close whether this player, did satisfy all the requirements for a catch. You can see the field judge there and the line judge probably talked about it, and they were able to catch, which is good. So we need something to come down in bounds, right? And you look left foot a split second before his hand touches out of bounds, and you're going to get a couple looks at this. So down, hand is in the air, so that's a good catch. Now we're only worried about, did he maintain control of the ball as he landed out of bounds? That's the other element. Since he was airborne, he's got to maintain control of the ground. I think you'll see it better from this angle here. We got the part in bounds just before the hand hits, and we got him maintaining control of the ball all the way to the ground. So we would actually have a good catch there. All right, I think I got another one. Let's see if we got a catch, no catch here in this process, applying what we know about. Okay, so you can see here that this official's coming in and looks like he's given it, I think this is an interception, and considering the runner down, there's not a fumble. Let me kind of replay it one more time for you. Catch requirements as there are for the offense. So I think you saw there, I'll try to back it up a little bit. Catch, knees are down. He had control the whole time. The ball just he survived the ground. What he didn't survive was after the play, guy stripping him of the ball. So that's why that's a good catch. And then I got one more I'm going to show you, and then we'll move on. We're going to get a couple looks at this, so I know it's a little grainy. That's just the quality of the video I got. Okay, so if we talk about this, I'm going to try to stop it. Okay, the process here is receivers going airborne. It's the same process in the end zone, whether it is in normal field of play. The receiver goes airborne. He's got to get control of the ball. He's got to get a body part in before he goes out of bounds. And since he's going to the ground, he has that added requirement of he has to maintain control of the ball. So as we say, complete the process of going to the ground. So let's take a look at that from those aspects. You're going to get some really good. So do we have control? We got a body. It looks like he's got to survive the ground, and then see what happens here. And if you notice, the ball comes out. Let's play it again. This ball is going to come out. You see it hit the ground. It's just kind of laying. And I'm sure reviewed and reversed. I think the call in the field was a touchdown. I'm sure this call got reversed because he did not maintain control of the ball as he went to the ground. Okay. Any questions? We went through catch, no catch, kind of there. The requirements for what actually makes a catch or an interception or recovery. We will talk about that a lot more when we get into the passing game as well. But that's a very, very important aspect of the game, and almost every game is going to have some element of, was that a catch? Was it not a catch? So, any questions we need to cover there, Alexi?
It was good.
All right. We got a smart group of guys here and gals here, maybe. Okay, tackle box. Again, another definition that we have to understand because there are a lot of rules that involve the tackle box. And it's just simply whoever is the snapper, we're going to go 5 yards left and right of him. And then from the offensive line of scrimmage all the way to that end line, that behind them, that end line is the back line on the end zone. It's not the goal line, it's the end line. That's how big the tackle box is. So if somebody is on the 1 yard line, Team B's 1 yard line going in, that tackle box would extend 109 yards backwards all the way to the end line. Now that's an exaggeration, but I think you get the point. The good news is the tackle box disintegrates once the ball leaves it. So we're not too concerned about the tackle box once the ball leaves it. There is another definition. It's called the blocking zone. And I think the good news here really is there are very, very few rules out that really rely on understanding the blocking zone, but we still do need to know it. This used to be a lot more in play when it came to blocking below the waist, legality or not. But there are some still 1 or 2 rules that do apply to the blocking zone. So if you kind of look at this case, it's not the snapper, it's the middle lineman. And then we're going to go 5 yards left and right, and then we're only going to go 3 yards behind and 3 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. That's your blocking zone. And again, just like the tackle box, the blocking zone disintegrates when the ball leaves it. Okay, let's talk about blocking. Actually, there's an actual definition for blocking. It's obstructing an opponent by intentionally contacting him with any part of the blocker's body. Pretty straightforward. Pushing is also blocking an opponent with open hands. All right, so a block below the waist is a type of block which the force of the initial contact is below the waist of an opponent who has 1 or both feet on the ground. And I don't want you to get confused between block below the waist and clipping. Clipping is blocking below the waist, but you're blocking the player below the waist from behind. So a block, and also a blocker who makes contact above the waist and then slides below the waist has not blocked below the waist. So as long as they started above that waist, we're not going to throw a blocking below the waist foul. So if the blocker, and here's the key thing, if the blocker first contacts the opponent's player's hands also at the waist or above, it is illegal above the waist block. You can see the rules reference there as well. This is one of those personal fouls. This is a 15-yard foul when it does occur. And by philosophy, when in doubt, it is a block below the waist. All right, blocking below the waist is illegal. It is an illegal block by any player, and here's the scenarios. After we've had a change of possession, so a turnover or something. During a scrimmage kick down, so if we had a field goal or a try or a punt, there are no blocking below the waist by anybody on the field. That's Team A or Team B. During a free kick down, so if we're kicking off, we can also not block below the waist during that hold down. Okay. Also, when this really applies more for, well, I should say, when more than 5 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. It used to be it could apply to Team A and not Team B, but now the good news is that this also applies to all the players on the field. Once the ball is 5 yards beyond the line of scrimmage, there is nobody blocking below the waist. It is a legal block against the runner. I mean, that's pretty much common sense. You can contact the runner below the waist. And we're going to talk a little bit more about blocking below the waist as it pertains to Team B as well. So let's kind of talk about, you're going to hear terminology a lot. You won't see it as much in the rule book anymore, but this is the best way to visualize it. When players are blocking below the waist, we kind of talk about this 10-2 block. And think of the player who's getting blocked having his arms extended kind of out like this, with the left hand being kind of at they're standing on the face of a clock at the 10 o'clock position and their right hand at the 2 o'clock position. This defines a region that is directly in front of him. So a 10-2 block is one that an opponent makes from the front within that 10-2 region. And that's sometimes what we will call blocking from the front. So if a player is restricted, and we'll talk about who those are, they may legally block below the waist with a 10-2 block only, subject to those requirements that we talked about on the prior slide. So they can legally block from the front. That's that region defined 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock by the person who is being blocked. An unrestricted player can block from the side, not only from that 10-2 region, but now they can block from the side, what we'd call, if you put those hands in the 9 o'clock and the 3 o'clock position. Notice they're not behind. It has to be from the side or from the front. So we use the term restricted and unrestricted. You don't see the rule book use that much anymore, but I think it's still an easier way for us to understand if a player is restricted or unrestricted. And whichever one they are, we'll talk more about, how do we know who's restricted and unrestricted? Which type of block can they do? Can they only block from the front, or can they block from the front or the side? Blocking below the waist is allowed as follows. So for linemen, remember that definition of linemen we talked about? With their initial position completely inside the tackle box. And we talked about tackle box. There's another definition. You can see that's why it's important to understand these definitions. So for linemen who their initial position is completely inside the tackle box, except the tight end, we'll talk about that in a minute, even though if he's certainly in that tackle box, he's excluded, may legally block below the waist inside the tackle box until the ball leaves the tackle box. And this is from the front or side, so they get that full 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock region. Only the people who meet this requirement, only the linemen who meet this requirement. Here's the exception. For a lineman's initial position to be considered completely inside the tackle box, he must be positioned within 5 yards of that snapper. Remember that box goes from 5 yards left and right, and be no more than the second lineman from the snapper. So what they're saying there is, I'm going to use the common terms, unless he's a guard or a tackle and completely inside the tackle box, then he's not considered in this case to be able to block from the front and side. So I use that tight end reference. He's not, the tight end would be the third lineman from the snapper. Therefore, we would not consider him able to block from the 9-3 region. He would be restricted. All other Team A players are allowed to block below the waist only from the front at the 10 to 2 o'clock region. That's the restricted blocking that we talked about earlier. Once the ball leaves the tackle box, Team A players may block low only from the front, only in that 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock region. So even though these linemen were able to block from the 9-3 region, they can only do it while the ball is in the tackle box. So it's important to look at these at the split. So here you can see we're seeing, a basic standard formation. We've got a quarterback in shotgun formation. We've got a snapper, 2 guards, and 2 tackles. And you can see the 5-yard lines lined up there. All of these guys are well within 5 yards each way of the snapper. And so they're all in the tackle box. They would be considered unrestricted. While the ball's still in the tackle box, they can block from the front and the side. Now let's talk about tight splits. So you can see now, this is what I was talking about with we throw a tight end in the mix. You can see that all of these guys, all these linemen are certainly within the tackle box, including on the left side. You can see that you have a tight end. But remember, per the UIL, the third lineman is always considered to be restricted. He does not get the ability to block front and side. He's front only. The other 5 players to his right are all unrestricted. So let's just kind of show a graphic here a little bit and talk about who's restricted and who's unrestricted. So we got a formation here, showing the tackle box. Obviously, I can't show it going all the way back to the end line, but I think you get the point. So let's talk about who's restricted. If you look at this diagram, A81 is restricted because he's outside the tackle box. A13 is not a lineman, and he's not completely in the tackle box. A80, again, he's a lineman, but he's not in the tackle box. And then you have some other backs here, A11, A14, and A12. Again, they're not linemen, so those guys will all be restricted. When they can legally block below the waist, they have to block from the front. And I use the term there, when they can legally block. All right, another example here. Let's talk about restricted and unrestricted. So we have as restricted A81, who's our wideout on the left, A80, who's a wideout on the right. They're not in the tackle box, pretty straightforward. We have backs A13, 14, 11, and 12. Again, they're not linemen, so right there, they're going to all be restricted. Okay, another example here. Let's talk about who's restricted. Again, we have 81 and 80, the wideouts. They're not in the tackle box, so they only can block when they can legally block. They can only do it from the front. And then we have backs A11, A12, A13, and A14. Again, they're not linemen. Even though they're in the tackle box, they are still restricted as well. Okay, here's that example we talked about where we have the tight end, right? So only the linemen who are no farther than 2 spots away from the snapper, and they're on the line, would be unrestricted at snap. So in this case, A81, even though he's on the line, he's in the tackle box, he is still restricted because he's that third lineman from the snapper. And then you can see the other ones here. I'm not going to name them verbatim. So team A players, we kind of talked about this 5 yards beyond the neutral zone. So team A players may not block below the waist when the block occurs 5 yards or more beyond the neutral zone. And then we have crackback blocks. You hear this term a lot. All we're talking about there are players outside the tackle box at the snap or anytime after the snap or in motion at the snap may not block below the waist toward the original position of the ball at the snap. So if you were to draw a line from inline to inline through that football at the snap, they can't be coming back in and blocking somebody low below the waist. They're restricted from that. That's a safety thing, just to kind of add a little color to that. I mean, the goal of the NCAA's rules makers and UILs, they want to give the person being blocked the best opportunity to see that block coming when it's coming below the waist, because that's a high risk for injury type of block. So these rules are all designed around giving that player being blocked the best opportunity to see the block coming so they can prepare themselves for it and hopefully not get injured. Now, another term we have is a peel back block. This is a block that is directed back toward the offensive team's inline, so behind them. This block is illegal if the ball has left the tackle box. So team A is restricted. They can legally block below the waist, do a peel back block if that ball has not left the tackle box. You'll hear these terms a lot, crackback block and peel back block. You're going to hear them anytime you're in rule summaries and they're talking about blocking below the waist. These topics will absolutely come up. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about Team B. So, or whoever's on defense. Most time it's going to be Team B, but if we have a change of possession, it could change. But defensive blocks below the waist are only legal within a 10-yard zone, 5 yards behind and 5 yards beyond the neutral zone. And the defensive team is always restricted to 10-2. They do not get the full front and side, that 9-3 region. Okay, there's some exceptions. Against an eligible Team A pass receiver beyond the neutral zone, unless attempting to get to the ball or ball carrier, this prohibition ends when a legal forward pass is no longer possible by rule. So what they're saying here is that you cannot block, Team B cannot, or the defense cannot block legally block below the waist a Team A pass receiver beyond the neutral zone unless they're attempting to get to the ball or ball carrier. Again, that would be a very high risk block because that pass receiver is probably not paying attention to how he's going to get blocked. He's probably running his route and looking back at the quarterback. There's also another exception. We cannot block a receiver. Team B cannot block a receiver if they're in position to receive a backwards pass. Again, their field of vision is probably not looking at who's going to be blocking them. They're probably looking for a backwards pass to come their way, and so they're probably focusing on the quarterback. Okay, here's a good play that kind of has a couple. I think it's our culprit's going to be number 16 here, if I remember right. A couple examples of some blocks below the waist, and we'll kind of talk through this and then show the video a couple times, so hopefully you'll get the idea. So let's talk about this for a second. So I think, we're not looking right down the line of scrimmage, so we don't have the benefit of seeing, but I think, if we were to just look at this and let's assume that everyone who's a lineman there in front of 16 and 11, they're inside the tackle box, they're on the line, so they can block from the front or side as long as the ball is still in the tackle box. And then we've got number 16 and number 11 in view here. These players are back, so they're not linemen. They're restricted. Any blocking below the waist that they legally can do must be from that 10 to 2 range of the person they're blocking. So let's play it and see what we get here. Watch number 16 primarily. Oops, I don't know why I did that. If you saw that block there, sure looks like from the side right there. It's very close. When in doubt, it is a block below the waist. He was restricted. He doesn't get that full 9 to 3. If that would have been one of the linemen and they blocked that way, that would have been perfectly fine. Ball still in the tackle box. And at this point, this would probably, in judgment, I would have no problem if you threw a flag on this for an illegal block below the waist. So let's play it. Continue to watch 16 throughout the play. I don't know why it does that, but we're going to go back to it. If we were to, I want to stop this. We talked about peel back blocks. So one thing to note, the ball has left the tackle box. This guy's almost all the way over to the 9-yard mark, so the top of the number. So there cannot be any peel back blocks now since the ball has left the tackle box. So look at number 16 over here again and watch what kind of block he does. Might even been a clip. So I'm going to play the whole play again. I think you saw there that we had 2 illegal block below the waist, both of them on the same player. We can only enforce one of them. There's the first one. The player is going to get up, quarterback's outside of the tackle box, and here comes 16 swimming upstream. You could have even called clipping there if you wanted to, but I think at a minimum, we definitely have an illegal block below the waist of the peel back variety. Might have even had a late hit there, but that's really not the topic here. Okay, we got another one here, I believe. A good example of a wide receiver. So this is going to be kind of an example of a crackback block. And I think this is going to be number 2 above here. Is going to, again, he is outside the tackle box, and he is restricted then from coming back towards the original position of the ball and blocking low on a defender. So let's watch number 2 here. So did everyone see that? Clearly came back in towards the original position of the ball and blocked the defender low. And it doesn't matter whether it was from 10 to 2 or from the side. he's restricted. He cannot come back in and block below the waist if he's coming back, if he's outside the tackle box and coming back in at the initial position of the snap. We'll play it one more time so you can see it. Very, very dangerous, very dangerous type of block, can result in a lot of injuries. That's why that rule is in there, to try to officiate those types of blocks out of the game. So I think, folks, what we're going to do now, we're about halfway through the presentation, and that's really where we wanted to get. And I think we're coming up about on top of the hour. We'll pick up in the next class, starting with chop block, and go through the rest of the definitions in this presentation. But I wanted to save a couple minutes. Alexi, Keith, if there's any questions we need to address in the chat box.
I answered the last ones that were put into the chat box, Bruce. Looks like it was talking about here. Hold on. Quarterback under center or in the shotgun, would they count as a back? And yes, they are still considered a back if they're under the center and in shotgun. And illegal formation is a live ball foul.
Alrighty.
You let it.
I also see somebody asked if that peel back block I showed in that video would be a flagrant foul. I mean, in that scenario, I don't think it was rose to the level of a flagrant foul. I think that would be just the standard, either clipping or block below the waist. But you know, you do have to be on guard if it does look like someone is purposely doing it and putting someone in extreme danger. Somebody asked about a catch question. What was the catch question? If a player were to secure a catch with his legs after muffing the catch, would we not consider that a catch? No, we would not. If you remember, if you go back to the definition, the player has to control the ball with his hands and arms. So if that player comes down and let's say he's on his back and his knees are kind of up and the ball's between his knees, if he were to reach up and grab the ball with his hands or arms, we'd have a catch. But if he falls to the ground, the ball's in between his legs, and he just gets up and lets the ball hit the ground, that's an incomplete pass. And that was actually put in a couple years ago. And interesting enough, I had that exact play happen in a game I did last year, where the ball went right through the receiver's arms, right down to his legs, and he got it, and he kind of rolled out of bounds with the ball in his legs, in between his legs. And that was not a catch. And it was a hard explanation to the coach, but by rule, it's not a catch. Hopefully that answered it. Robert, looks like he had a question on intentionally fumbling the ball forward is illegal. Say it's fourth down and the kid is going to be short. Well, so it's not illegal to fumble the ball forward or even intentionally. Now, if we think it's a pass, that's a different story. But there are specific rules for fourth down fumbles. So there's no way they're going to typically gain an advantage by doing that because of the rules. It's going to come back to the spot of the fumble in many cases, or to the most, if they don't make the line to gain, it's going to be to the most advantageous spot for Team B. We'll talk about all that later, but that is not necessarily a foul, but there are rules that govern how we treat fourth down and fumbles. Okay, I'm going to, I'll try to post these slides to the website where I showed you guys. Go to dfoa.com and on info, new officials information. You'll see these slides out there probably later tonight or tomorrow. We're going to pick up next week. And right now, guys, we are trying to get back to in-person. Unfortunately, the place that we are trying to use has had some staffing changes and some process changes, so we're not able to get a confirmation right now that we can get the room for next week. We're trying. I know Xavier's on. He's trying as well. So, but just like we did this week, we'll let you know if we're going to meet in person or if we're going to do it remotely through Ring Central. And I know, guys, I apologize. Not everyone's internet's good, so what I see and what you see might not be good, and vice versa. It's all subject to going over the internet. We're doing the best we can to get you the videos, and hopefully you can see them. We'll talk more about access to the videos later on. I'm going to try to figure out a way that every new member can actually get access to our training library, and then you can go in and watch some of these videos as well. So stay tuned on that. We'll see if we can find a way to make that happen. But other than that, anybody got any questions on how you get signed up, or how do you register in RefTown? Hopefully everyone knows the steps you got to take. You have to get, be active and eligible in TASO and the DFOA. You have to register in RefTown. Otherwise, the satellite secretaries won't get visibility to you and won't be able to schedule you games. Jeff asked a question about mechanics. Yeah, there will be mechanics questions on the test, and they'll specify in the question whether it's a question around 3, 4, or 5 man. There's no TASO training credits for this session. We will have the TASO state virtual meeting at the end of July. If you attend that, you'll actually get, I believe it's up to 11 points, depending on how many, if you attend the whole session and you attend some of the breakouts. So, but you don't get training credits for this. So DeAndre's asked a question. So there are 3 websites we have to be registered on in order to move on. Well, I think the way I would put it is you have to be registered with TASO. TASO is the state organization recognized by the UIL to be able to provide football officials for UIL contests. So you have to be a member of TASO, and along with that, you will get login credentials to the TASO website. Same thing for DFOA. You have to join DFOA, and then, but you don't get login credentials. Our website does not require a login at all. But you will then have to register in RefTown, which is what RefTown is what we use to assign games. It's going to contain your officiating profile. When you register, it'll get approved, and then the satellite secretaries will see you and be able to schedule you for games. So there's really only 2 websites that you're going to have to worry about logging in on. It's TASO and it's RefTown. Gary, you asked a question about where we find the email addresses for the secretaries. Go to the website. Look at directories, sub-varsity assigners, that has all of their contact information in there. There is not. Jeff Tokar asked a question if there's a separate test for being a boxman on a varsity crew. No, there's not. But I would encourage you to read the mechanics manual for chain and clock operators. Okay, if there's no other questions, so Reagan Heddens, you asked a question, who's the secretary for Irving? I don't know off the top of my head, but if you go to the website, dfoa.com, under directories, sub-varsity assigners, you'll see all the satellite secretaries and what school districts they assign games for. Actually, Xavier, do we still do Irving, or is Irving not in a different chapter? Shoot me an email afterwards, Reagan. I'll confirm for you. Somebody named Admiral is asking, what is a TASO password? Well, everyone's TASO password is different, so it's whatever you set up for your TASO account. Okay, well, thanks, folks. Next week, Alexi will be picking up on Rule 2 definitions and taking us to the end of that presentation. In the meantime, if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out and ask either me, Alexi, or Keith. Our contact information is in the presentation that we've already posted to the DFOA website, or if you're in RefTown, you can look us up. We'll answer any questions that we can for you. So on that, I think we'll call it a wrap and see you guys a week from tonight, hopefully in person, but stay tuned. We'll let you know if it's going to be virtual. Take care.